You know, finally crossing a border into the European Union if you're a migrant can be a difficult enough journey on its own. But who's there to protect you from possible physical and sexual abuse at the hands of those patrolling the borders? This is Roundtable. Welcome to the programme. I'm David Foster. Croatia, in this case, is accused of doing nothing to stop attacks on migrants and refugees, attacks by its own officials, it's alleged, on its border with Bosnia-Herzegovina. For its part, Croatia now says it is looking into the allegations. The route through the Bosnia-Croatia border is popular with refugees attempting to reach EU member states in Western Europe. The Danish Refugee Council recently collected testimonies from more than 70 refugees and migrants who claimed that they'd experienced inhumane treatment and even sexual abuse by the Croatian authorities. The European Union's Commissioner for Home Affairs, Ylva Johansson, says she's taking these reports of inhumane and degrading treatment of people at the Croatian border, as she put it, very seriously. A spokesperson from Croatia's Ministry of the Interior said its border police has been accused of inhumane treatment without providing any kinds of facts, proof, or at least basic information which could be verified. As migrants continue to try to cross the Bosnia-Croatia border, will the European Union investigate recent reports of brutality? And do migrants need greater legal protection? Well, for this roundtable, we go first of all to Bonn in Germany, and we say hello to Arafatul Islam, a journalist for Deutsche Welle, who's been talking to migrants on the border. They told him of abuse by Croatian authorities. We go to Sarajevo, where we say hello to Nidžara Ahmetašević, independent journalist and scholar who looks at refugees and migrants in the Balkans and Europe. And then to Cardiff, where we see Professor Christian Kaunert, an expert on security and policing on EU borders. Great to have you all on the programme. Before we get talking, I'm going to read this statement from the Croatian Ministry of the Interior. Immediately after receiving those allegations, this ministry initiated relevant procedures to verify them, since it is our objective and in our interest to not only remove any suspicion of actions taken by Croatian police officers, but also to sanction and eliminate irregularities if by chance any have occurred. Arafatul, tell me what you heard from those people at the border and why perhaps you chose to believe them.
I was there last week to cover this migrant crisis that has been happening in Velika Kladuša, one of the border towns of Bosnia, and it's very close to Croatia border. And there, what I know is that there are like 1,500 refugees and migrants, mostly from Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, are staying there. I talked a few of them with, and most of them said that they were beaten very badly by the Croatian police when they tried to cross the Bosnia-Croatia border to reach European Union. They are mostly trying to go to Italy, France, Portugal, and these three countries mainly they are targeting at.
I'm going to interrupt you at this point and say, how do you know that what they are telling you is true?
That's a very vital question. What happened? I talked to different people in different places. Like there are three different locations. One is a jungle camp, and then there is an abandoned factory, and then there is a camp run by IOM. So all these three different places, people are saying the same thing. They were beaten by Croatian police at the border, and they are. And I have seen injuries myself. Like I met with a Bangladeshi refugee who was beaten just an hour before I met him, and he was bleeding from his right side of his forehead, and also there was bruises all over his body. So it's clear that someone has beaten him very badly. And I have also seen another refugee from Afghanistan, and he was talking to me. Exactly the same thing, that he was beaten last night at the border and his leg is broken. And also I talked to this IOM officials who run this camp in Velika Kladusa, they are also saying the same thing. They every day they receive a few people who are beaten at the border. So something is happening for sure there. The question is whether it's Croatian police or someone else. But they are.
Let's go to Nidžara, if I may, and say when I was looking into the background of this, what shocked me more than anything else, other than looking at the photographs that I saw that Arafatul had taken, was that there are suggestions this has been going on for a number of years.
Yeah,
yes,
it's going on.
This is going on for
Sorry,
years.
this is for Nidžara.
Okay. Yeah, it's going on for years, and I'm shocked about the ignorance coming from different EU countries and international media, I have to say, because different independent grassroots, mostly organizations, journalists, and people on the move who survived this torture are talking about this violence at the EU borders. I have to stress, it's not only Croatia. The same is happening in Greece, in Romania, in Bulgaria, in Hungary, and in Croatia. And it is happening for years now. And for me, the biggest shock and the biggest surprise is why everybody was quiet about this for so many years, and why now we are talking only about Croatia, like Croatia is the only culprit for this, instead of talking about EU policy of closed borders and the obsession with security.
Okay, we're going to bring up a map that shows some of the routes that migrants take when they're coming from the east, maybe Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan. You can't be certain just looking at this, and how they're getting into the European Union, how many different countries they have to go through. And I want to ask you, Christian, if I can, if these are police officers, if these are officials at the border, why has this been allowed to go on for so long?
This is obviously a very complex question, because in a sense what we have is the larger entity, the European Union, and of course there's been issues with refugees and migration for already a number of years. I mean, as you may remember, the big crisis, of course, hit in 2015 and 2016. And during that particular crisis, there were quite large numbers, or perceived large numbers, that entered the European Union, particularly then going up the Balkan route, which is also the kind of route that we're talking about now, and then going up further to Germany and then to the Scandinavian countries and other Western European countries. At the time, there were suggestions of about 1 million people coming to Germany. Later, it was confirmed more around 500,000 people that have actually then gone to Germany. Now, the larger issue here was that, of course, the general policy of the European Union is a relatively dysfunctional system. It is a system whereby member states that are close to the border are in a sense disadvantaged, because of course the asylum system is built on the principle that the first country that you enter the European Union, you're then obliged to apply for asylum. So if ever, let's say, Greece, Italy, or in this particular case, Croatia, they actually register people applying for asylum, then they are forced to take them back should they go any further in Europe. Now, this
so do you think, can I interrupt? Do you think that what we're hearing about, not just at this border crossing, but as Nidžara was saying, in other countries as well as Croatia on the Bosnian border, is this sanctioned by the authorities if it is happening, or is it just rogue people carrying out this brutality?
Well, that's very difficult to say. I mean, under European Union legislation, they're clearly infringing the European Convention on Human Rights. They're clearly infringing the European Charter of Fundamental Rights, which, in a sense, individuals, but also NGOs on behalf of those individuals could take to the European Court of Justice or the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. Either one of those courts would clearly, in a sense, come down on those kind of issues. Of course,
okay, well, just a quick one. This happened with Hungary. Hungary was taken to the European Court of Justice. It was found guilty, or the case was found proven against it earlier on this year, and it basically said, so what, we're not going to do anything about it.
Well, it's not quite as easy as that, because then the court, of course, if they disregard the verdict, is able to impose sanctions. And if Hungary, at the end of the process, still is unwilling to play ball, the European Court can actually in a sense, reduce the payments that are made to Hungary, so the money can be taken directly at the source by the European
But in the
Commission.
meantime, nothing's changed. Arafatul, I will come back to you in just a moment to ask you about the conditions up there once again. But I want to ask Nidžara, because it was obviously quite difficult for Christian to answer that question, whether these beatings are sanctioned. But is it your sense that governments in the countries where this alleged brutality takes place are willing to do anything to keep these migrants out?
To be very honest, this is the question, is European Union and European Commission willing to do something? None of these countries would do this, especially not Croatia, would do any of these things that they are doing, and like also preventing people from access to asylum, like brutally beating up people. Among the people who were beaten up and who were went through this hell were also many children. To my knowledge, it's 40% of them are children. There are many women. There are LGBTQ population. Everybody is there, and I'm sure that.
But my
Croatia...
question, sorry, was not about the European Union. We will come to that in the larger sense in just a moment. But my question was, if this is happening, let's say in Croatia, is it an element of rogue officers, people carrying this out, with the authorities in the capital unaware of what is going, or is it actually sort of sanctioned by central government because they don't want these people in at any cost?
No, but that's why I mentioned the EU. No, it's not sanctioned by the government because the government is doing what the EU wants them to do. And it's not sanctioned by the EU. These countries are EU members. This is not Bosnia. We're talking about EU members. And there are very strict conditions to be a member of EU, as we from Bosnia do know that. So they are not sanctions because this is coming from the EU, from the Brussels.
I'm sorry, it's a language issue. When I say sanction, I mean approved as opposed to sanctions themselves, which are, of course, as we know, a different tool. But is it approved of by the central government?
Oh, it's approved. And again, I will go back. It's approved by the European Commission, by the central government of all of these countries, and looks like it's approved by the entire world, by the West society at least, because I don't see that the Western society is very loud or at least clear in saying, no, this cannot happen because these people are human beings. You have to stop doing this. So no, I mean...
Okay, but I'm going to actually read something out from the Danish Refugee Council, who says it discovered an awful lot of this, and then ask you very quickly what you think of the Danish Refugee Council. These are the words from the DRC: treating human beings like this, inflicting severe pain and causing unnecessary suffering, irrespective of their migratory status, cannot and should not be accepted by any European country or by any EU institution. And yet you say the Danish Refugee Council is part of the European Union, or at least supported by it, and it can't be trusted to do anything on its own about this.
No, of course. I mean, we have the DRC is present in Bosnia for 3 years, and for 3 years they know that this is happening. They never ever said even one word. Now, when they need a good PR, because they are really criticized by the local activists, NGOs, and people here in Bosnia, and now they do this. This is a PR campaign for them. DRC is paid from the EU and from the Danish government.
Arafatul, I want to go back to your trip into this particular area, and there have been many miserable stories about what it's like to be a migrant over the last 10 years, trying to get from your homeland to somewhere that you consider to be much safer. But these were women, children, and young people. These were people who had no access to food. What do you think is their future?
I mean, they're stuck in Bosnia, I would say, because they have crossed all other borders. Like many of them came through Turkey, for example. Some of them came through Greece, and they have crossed other countries like Macedonia, Albania without any trouble. Those borders, there were nothing, and nobody stopped them. Even in Bosnia, they can easily go to the border to Croatia, and even Bosnian authorities don't stop them from going to the border. So what they want, or what they hope to cross this Bosnia-Croatia border to reach European Union, but they're not targeting Croatia. For example, none of them I talked to are interested in staying in Croatia for a long time. All they want that's illegal, of course, but they just want to go to Italy, for example, or France or Portugal. And if you are talking about the living condition in Bosnia, in Velika Kladuša, what I have seen, like there are altogether 1,500 refugees and migrants, and only 700 of them are living in a camp run by IOM. Others are in the forest, so they don't have like sufficient food there. They don't have any water supply. They are spending nights in like polythene. It's called shakes made of polythene sheets and traps. So they are not by any means in a condition where they would like to stay even a night more if they have the opportunity.
I get that. I get that, but something's occurring to me, and that is that there are reports of an awful lot of thefts as well as beatings and sexual assaults, and of women giving birth in the forest. Thefts, is this undoubtedly the work of officials, or could this be gangs taking advantage of people who are in a very weak situation, just to rob them of their belongings and make their lives miserable?
Yeah, there are basically. For example, in Velika Kladuša, some refugees and migrants, they told me that there are groups, like there is an Afghan mafia group and there is a Pakistani mafia group. These people, they are basically smugglers, and they arrange these trips for refugees from Bosnia to Italy, for example, and they take 2,000 to 4,000 euros from each refugee or migrant. So this business has been happening there already, and if someone
so there are thieves, there are
Italy, for
unscrupulous people.
Yes.
Unscrupulous people, there are people smugglers, and there are those people who are trying to keep them out of Croatia. Christian, let me come to you.
If I may please
Nidžara,
interrupt.
Please do.
Please, first of all, this is not a fair question, and I have to correct my colleague. These people are not doing anything illegal. These are human beings who are looking for safety, for asylum, for a place where they will be safe. Second, robberies are not happening. Croatian police, and there are many proofs of this, Croatian police is taking their phones, their clothes, and burning it in order to prevent a future attempt to cross. So it's not really robbery. They are destroying their stuff. They're taking, like during the winter, and we know that, and I'm present every day in the field and in touch with people on the move every day. They're taking their shoes off, and then they force them to walk through the snow back to the city.
Okay,
So
I want to go to
Christian.
Thank you. Thank you. Nidžara, thanks for the moment. Christian, what is going to happen to these people? And it's not just this one group, it's so many different groups and so many different crossings in so many different countries. But in this particular case, what is likely to happen to them?
Well, that's very, very difficult to say. I mean, when they are physically on the territory of an EU member state, they have the legal possibility to apply for asylum that very moment. So as soon as they enter Croatian territory, Croatia is not normally legally allowed to prevent them from lodging an asylum claim. That is something.
No, I know that, but what we're hearing is that they're still in Bosnia. So what happens to them?
That's where it gets more complicated, because of course, as long as they're not on the territory of an EU member state, they don't yet have a legal possibility to apply for asylum. They have to physically be on the territory of an EU member state in order to apply inside the EU. Now, as long as they're in Bosnia, obviously the Bosnian government is, in a sense, responsible for their well-being and for their safety. So in a sense, the Bosnian government needs to protect these people from those incursions, because legally speaking, they're their responsibility as long as.
What if they had traveled into Bosnia from another EU country, not one where they wanted to stay? Would that country, if these people could prove they had been there, be obliged to take them?
In fact, if, let's say, they had arrived in Bosnia, or, well, actually, the case is better if we talk about Croatia, because Bosnia is, of course, not part of the Dublin system. But if it can be proven that, let's say, a particular person has entered, let's say, via Greece, then Greece would be obliged to take them back. There's no doubt. The problem is very often that there is no physical proof, and as a result of that, maybe that country wouldn't take them back. But as soon as there's physical proof, then the country would be legally obliged to take them back, because that's the first country that they entered.
Nidžara, you are in Bosnia. Is it your experience that people such as these would be welcome if they couldn't get into an EU country?
In Bosnia?
Yeah.
People are very welcome. I have to say that many local people are participating in this kind of like solidarity response to this, what is happening. The government in Bosnia is very weak, and I have to correct my colleague, the responsibility here in Bosnia, and that's something that Western media very often forget, lies on the European Union. In June 2016, European Union made decision that Bosnia cannot be responsible for safety and for taking care of the migrants in this country, and they gave the full authority and all the money, and so far it's more than 70 million euros to IOM, International Organization for Migration, DRC, and different UN agencies. They are the ones who are responsible to provide like human standards inside of the camps. They don't do that, and they basically implement the EU policy. Can these people stay in Bosnia? I have to remind you that at the moment Bosnia is a country with a huge migration, because more than like a huge number of people left Bosnia because life here is almost impossible. This is a country, a state that doesn't exist, a state that exists only in some kind of vacuum, and we are trying to survive. It's very hard. They are welcome, but I don't know how we will survive, and I'm very afraid that if people stay here, it will be difficult for them.
Yeah, very difficult in a country that's been through as much as Bosnia has. Arafatul, let me come back to you and ask you about the situation at the border. You talked about 1,500 people being in this particular camp. 700 of them have accommodation. The remainder just sleep under polythene sheets. Are more people still coming? And if they are, what kind of reception are they getting at the border?
I don't think more people are coming at the moment, because winter is approaching. So there are, I mean, this 1,500 number is quite stable. I mean, at least last 3 months, this is the figure that IOM has. And in Bosnia, everyone is recorded by police. So even if they are not seeking asylum in Bosnia, police or Bosnian authorities have their names and other details. So I think this number is stable at the moment, but the question is like, what will happen with the rest of these 800 people who don't have any accommodation? And what I have learned from Velika Kladuša, for example, IOM wants to build another new camp there, so that these people who are now spending nights in camp in the forest and in abandoned factories can be accommodated there. But the local authorities, because of the protest from the locals of this town, they cannot build a new camp there. Even the camp, this Miral camp, the only one is there. I have seen protests that some locals, they want this camp to be moved somewhere else, because they don't want to see any more refugees and migrants in the town. So there are like some Bosnians they support it, but others don't.
Can I ask Christian? Sorry to cut across you there, but we're coming to the end of the program. Christian, let me ask you, do you think the European Union feels any responsibility to do something about this? Because it's been accused of simply turning its back.
Well, in the European Union, I think there's two developments going on at the same time, and they are sometimes contradictory. Because on the one hand, when refugees are accepted and acknowledged in the European Union, over the last couple of years, their rights have actually increased. And for the last 20 years, the asylum regime has become far more generous than it used to be. However, at the same time, the problem is, of course, at the border, and that's what we're discussing here. The border is where it's become, in a sense, harder to enter the territory of the European Union and to actually take advantage of those rights that the European Union accords to those that have actually managed to enter the European Union. So we have this kind of contradictory and partially almost schizophrenic development that the European Union, one organization, is going in two different directions all at the same time. And I think this will continue for the next couple of years, because at the heart of the problem is a dysfunctional system. And I think the Dublin system is partially to blame for this, because it disadvantages frontier states unfairly and therefore provides them with an incentive to flout the rules and not adhere to them properly, and to, in a sense, let those people go to another country and let them be that country's problem. And as long as we have a system that isn't, in a sense, harmonized, that all the countries are kind of harmonizing their interest into one system that actually organizes itself as one system, we're going to continue to have those problems, because they have an incentive to make sure that either people don't enter their territory, or if they do enter their territory, that they don't register them and just make them go to Western Europe in order to
It's a very, very difficult problem, isn't it? Because perhaps by making it better for the migrants, if they get into European Union countries, then more people will be encouraged to do it, and certain people will be encouraged to try to keep them out. I'm sorry to have to end it there, but we've run out of time. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on this edition of Roundtable. Thank you, wherever you happen to be watching. From me, David Foster, from the entire team, we hope to have your company another time. Until then, goodbye.